Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rubicki. I'm glad that you're here. Today we're going to talk about professionalism and the aspect of professionalism that has to do with leading your own gig, which I hope that you have many opportunities to do. All this stuff that we're going to talk about pretty much applies to anything, at least that's how I tried to think about it, whether it's a concert, hopefully, or a background gig, a wedding, a corporate gig, something like that. That said, I think a lot of these things will apply, and I know that many of you are semi-pros or pros, but hopefully I might have some ideas that maybe you didn't think about, or you'd be interested to see my process about how I think about leading gigs. Or if you're just getting started, perhaps you can get some tips that you haven't thought about. For me, a lot of this success comes from organization. Thankfully, I have made a pretty good living with these extra kind of gigs. Lots of background gigs, parties at wineries and weddings and bar mitzvahs and so on and so forth. So it's possible to make a good living doing that. Sometimes it gets real complicated, and so I take all of this stuff seriously and take organization seriously when it comes to gigs, because obviously it is how I make my money, and I also want to respect the musicians that I'm involving and the clients or venues that I'm working for. So the first thing I wanted to show you was one particular program that I use to help me stay organized. This is called OmniOutliner, and I want to sort of cut away to my computer here, and I'll do a sort of voiceover talking about how I use it for leading gigs. So this is an app called OmniOutliner, and it's what I use for organizing when I'm leading a gig. And here's why. Besides having these sort of tiers where I can keep things away from view if I want to, I really like the fact that one can attach an actual document in here and it will save the actual document as it is, and you can edit it and so on and so forth within OmniOutliner itself. So you don't need to save it somewhere else. It's easy to just copy paste things in here and so on and so forth. So what I do is I put the primary information here first in this first column, and then you can see that I have a column, is the contract signed, and then who are the musicians. If I don't have musicians, I leave it as band needed, and then have I sent emails to the band, have I sent the contract to the client, have I been paid, has the band been paid. And then if we go back to the gig itself, I've got initial all the information that I need about where it is and so on and so forth. Here are the contracts or invoice if I've got it here. And then I list the band. So who's going to play bass for me on this particular gig that I couldn't make? And I go through one at a time. Who are these players? Who do I think will make the gig and who do I call? Neil could make this gig, so I made sure that I wrote okay. I also oftentimes will write in here, texted for 25 or something so that I know when did I last contact that person. And then when they're confirmed, I put them up here in bold. So I know these guys are on the gig. And I know that I have a signed contract and so on and so forth. So I find this to be particularly helpful. I do it by year, and then I just sort of archive them. But I can go back and look at, I paid Charlton $200 for this gig last time, and here it is again. And so I want to pay him $200 again, or whatever it is. There's a lot more you can do with OmniOutliner, but that's how I use it. And while I'm here, I also wanted to show you just a general thing about my contract and so on and so forth. I actually took this from the Juilliard contracts they used to use when they would hire bands out. And I've just got basic information for myself at the top, and as well as the very small sort of specifics. It's just 2 pages. You can also make yourself an invoice template that you just sort of fill this information out separately. I learned the hard way. Some of you may already know. It's if you're sending multiple invoices to somebody, it's helpful for them that you number the invoices for them. Hopefully this is helpful for you as far as organizing things. It may look like a little bit of a mess here. It all makes sense to me, but certainly having it in one place is very, very helpful. Of course, you don't need to use OmniOutliner if you don't want to pay for it, if it doesn't work for you in some way, but I would recommend having some kind of system for yourself that keeps things in one place. We have to sort of reference it often, and when things get complicated, things are overlapping and so on and so forth, it's really helpful to have everything in one location so you can access it quickly. Let's go through this information that we're going to gather to put into whatever document or whatever system you're using for organizing things. Let's talk first about gathering the basics from the concert venue or from the client. And of course, there are the very basic basics, which are: what is the date? What is the time? What time are you expected to arrive if there's any sort of special requirements around that? If you're dealing with travel, that is of course a much more complicated situation, and so times become extremely critical about pickup times and airport times and so on and so forth. That's sort of another conversation altogether about sort of touring and so on and so forth. Nonetheless, so you want to think about all the specifics, the who are you playing for, where is it, what day is it, what time is it? Basics. What are you expected to play? What, if any, attire requirements are there? Are they expecting you to wear a tuxedo or suits, all black, whatever it is? You want to think about also how are you going to be paid as the leader, and you want to have a discussion about that. So besides those things, you also want to know about any sort of travel or lodging things, as I mentioned about if there is travel involved. Obviously, you want to talk about with the client or the venue, what are those things, who's paying for them, and so on and so forth. What backline is required, or what do they have? Do they have a drum set there? Do they have a piano there? So on and so forth. Very, very critical to know ahead of time. Do they have music stands? Very, very helpful to know if you know that you're going to be reading music. Is it going to be inside or outside? To me, very important. I really hate playing outside, so I really want to know ahead of time if I'm going to do it, because it changes what bass I'm going to bring. It changes what gear I'm going to bring as far as even amplification and extra stuff and how I'll dress and so on and so forth. That's important. And that dovetails with what is the exact location at the venue that you're playing. If it's a jazz club, that's very obvious. There's one place, right? Unless it's like Birdland, where there's multiple spaces. But if it's at a library, where in the library are you going to be? And so on and so forth. Are there any special load-in instructions, parking instructions? All this stuff you want to gather so that you can pass it on to the musicians and so that you know yourself. Is there any hospitality included? Is there a green room? Are they going to give you food? Are there any special, I don't know, things to know about the bathroom? I mean, you'll figure out some of that stuff when you get there. But it's all helpful to get as much information ahead of time as you can, including what is the schedule of the performance going to be? If it's a concert, how long are the sets? If it is a background gig, where are the breaks? And if it's okay that you take breaks. If it's not, you got to figure out how to have continuous music. Sometimes I bring an old iPod, not a phone, an actual iPod, so that I can use my phone separately and so it doesn't get interrupted by notifications. I will bring some kind of iPod, which you can get very cheaply if you want to get one from eBay or whatever. I load it with a playlist of nice music, and I have a simple 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch thing, and I plug it into the earphone jack, plug it into my amplifier if you don't have a big PA system, and just put music through the amplifier during your break if they really want music all the time. Sometimes though, you have to stagger breaks between the musicians. They say, no, we want musicians playing the entire time. And so you have to think ahead, okay, well at this point, I will have a little break and the drummer will have a break and the pianist and saxophone can play together. And then I come back and the saxophone player leaves and I play with the piano player, and then the drummer comes back and plays with me and the sax and the piano player, all those kinds of things. So you have to think about that ahead of time, and you want to also obviously pass this on to the musicians as well. You also want to think about any comps. If it's a concert, talk about any complimentary tickets that might happen and what's the process for getting them, how many they may have. Sometimes you negotiate that actually in a contract, which is again a sort of a separate discussion, but you want to know what's the situation with comp tickets, as well as you want to make sure that you discuss overtime. If it is a background gig, what is the situation? Can you do overtime? How much are you going to charge? Oftentimes, I will give folks about a 15-minute window. Like if they say we're going to stop at 6, but they really want us to keep going for 15 more minutes, I'll sort of get through it without giving, but a minute after, at the point of 16 minutes, I start charging them by the half hour per musician. And generally I charge $100 per hour per musician for extra hours, but that's dependent on the situation. Of course, you can do what feels right and best for you given your particular situation. So we've gathered all that information, and now it's time to start and try to put together the band. I really hope that you will join me in advocating in our community for one particular pet peeve of mine, and I know a lot of other people, which is when you call somebody for a gig, when you text them for a gig, give them all the information that is necessary in one communication at the very first point of contact. The first time you ask, can you do this gig? You want to give them the money. How much does it pay? How long is it? Where is it? And you can also tell them, obviously, what day is it, right? What time, what day, how much money, and any other important information. Do they need to bring a keyboard? If travel is provided, those kinds of things. So important things, but in one text. Are you available for this gig, XYZ? Here is the money. These are the requirements, and more than likely, they'll know what kind of music it is if it's coming from you. But if you play a bunch of different kinds of music, tell them what what the expectations are as far as what the repertoire is going to be.
Dance time.
There is definitely gray area as far as how close the gig is, for how long you wait for a response. And I'll do maybe another video at some point talking about being a good sideman. So how does one respond to that text? But as a leader, depending on how much lead time I have, dictates how long I'm waiting for a response. Hopefully you get a response within a day. If the gig is tomorrow, I'm gonna send a mass text to all the piano players that I think might do the gig and just say, hey, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry it's last minute, and I'm so sorry to have to do this, but I have to get a piano player for tomorrow. The first one to respond gets the gig, right? Like that happens sometimes. But generally, if there's somebody that you really think is a great match for the gig, you want to give them a little bit more time within reason, obviously. Wait a little bit, but give them all the information at once so they don't have to ask you how much does it pay, or okay, what day is it, right? Those are silly kind of questions we don't want to have them ask. And once they get back to you, tell them that the gig is confirmed on your end if it is, so that they can put it in their book, quote unquote. You ask them, hey, can you pencil this in, or can you put this in your book? The gig is confirmed, and that will sort of solidify the agreement between you and that person. If it's not for sure, let them know. Absolutely, you should let them know that at the beginning as well. Hey, this gig is not confirmed yet. I'm seeing if you are available. Here would be the money. These are all the other details. So once you've gathered everybody for who the band will be, you want to then share the information about the gig in much more detail closer to the date itself. Some people like the information further ahead of time, like me. Some people, though, I think most people prefer it closer to the date of the gig itself because it gets buried in their email inbox. And so I will go about 4 days ahead of time or so, and then I will let them know all these specifics in a very simple format. Please don't include extraneous information they don't need about the client wanted blah, 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 but I decided blah, blah. Don't include any of that. Hey, thanks for doing that. Here's the date, here's the time, here are the load-in instructions, and so on and so forth. What is a venue contact can be really, really helpful, including what is the event. Like if it's a background gig for a wedding, if it's a cocktail hour for a wedding, tell them the bride's name, because when you go to the venue, there may be multiple weddings. Hi, I'm here to play at the wedding. Oh, which one? There's 3, right? And then you're left sort of frustrated not knowing where to go. So be sure to include information that's going to get the musicians to where they need to be, including load-in instructions that we learned about earlier, and parking instructions, and so on and so forth. Obviously, let them know about any special repertoire. If there's going to be a rehearsal, as an aside, try to pay people for rehearsal. That would be really great. Include what backline is available. Obviously, you don't want somebody bringing a keyboard if there's a piano there. that is usable and good. So include that information as well as any information about hospitality. If they're going to feed you, again, you have to think from their perspective. What can I do that is within my power to empower them, empower the players that you are hiring to get to where they need to be easily and efficiently? So including this information is going to help with all that. If there's any special instructions, if they need to sign in with security, give themselves extra time and so on and so forth. What is the attire for the gig, of course? Is it outside? Again, my pet peeve. Tell people if it's outside. Please, 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 from a sideman. As a leader, you know, we can correct all these things that bad leaders have done to us, right? That's part of the reason for this video in the first place. So we've communicated with the musicians and we've gathered all the information, we've passed it on to the musicians, and now we want to get ready for the gig itself. One important thing, this has to do more with the musical side, but I feel like it is a professionalism question, and that has to do with programming. The root of what I'm talking about here that I learned from a teacher of mine applies in any situation, whether it's a concert of original music or whether it is a background gig. And that has to do with thinking about programming variety for the listeners. Even if they're not listening directly at a background gig, I believe subconsciously, you thinking about the programming affects how people observe or assess the music that is happening in the background. So what do I mean by that? Don't play too many tunes, even sequential tunes in the same key. For example, some people don't notice this and it's not that big of a deal, but this helps you sort of guide choices about songs. Don't play two songs that are in F major, one right after the next. And especially we want to think about changing sort of feels or grooves or tempos, right? So have a medium swing, a fast swing tune, obviously ballads, very helpful to think about mixing things up, as well as meter. Think about doing a couple things in 3 or 6. Perhaps odd meter. Do you want to do something in 5? Oftentimes people ask for take 5, obviously. Do you want to do something in 5? That adds another layer of variety. Also, rhythmic grooves or sort of genre things. You can do, obviously, throw in bossa or something that has to do with something quote unquote Latin, as we've talked about in other videos. That's going to add some variety as well. Besides adding other simple sort of groove oriented things that's going to give the music a different feeling, even if it's a standard. Here's what I mean. There's a famous drum beat called the Poinciana groove from the Ahmad Jamal trio. Their arrangement of a tune called Poinciana. The drummer Vernel Fournier plays this particular drum rhythm that gives the music a different feel, and the Israel Crosby and bass does a different thing. It's not a walking line. So in other words, what I'm saying is, if you do a standard, there are certain standards that work really well with a Poinciana feel. That's going to feel like a different song in the programming. As well as doing like a New Orleans feel. That's going to feel like a different thing. You can also ask your drummer, hey, what sort of grooves haven't we tried? And put a standard in that groove. You can also, for fun, if you're bored, on a background gig, do some other standards in slightly different ways that aren't too complicated and don't require rehearsal. For example, you might take a really well-known standard like All the Things You Are and do it in 3 instead of 4. Or a common one is something like really do a little tongue-in-cheek with giant steps and make it a slow bossa nova. It's actually really fun. So those kinds of things can make a difference again to the listener, whether they are really paying attention or not. So you want to prepare those things ahead of time, at least thinking about how am I going to approach this. And if you are playing, as I hope that you are on the gig, one thing we need to train ourselves to do is to think ahead of time. While you're playing, if you're calling tunes and it's not rehearsed, you need to think, what is the next thing I'm going to do? And if thinking in these broad headings of, oh gosh, we haven't done something in 3, immediately starts to get your wheels turning so you can think ahead of time. So there's not a lot of dead time between tunes. I'm not saying segue from one tune to the next, although sometimes that does work, but you want to keep those breaks to a minimum. That's going to help you seem more polished and professional. The last thing about programming would be a very simple thing. Can you feature someone in the band specifically? And also remember, talking about sort of subheading of programming, not everyone has to solo on every tune, unless you're trying to fill space, right? So especially if it's a concert situation, not everyone has to solo. Please don't do that. And also, taking that to the next level, you can feature a certain player on a certain tune. Ask them ahead of time, hey, what tune do you want to be featured on? And if it's a pianist, maybe they want to do something solo, or maybe if there's a horn player, you say, hey, the pianist's going to take this tune, you just step aside. Whatever it is, think about a bass solo for yourself too, a bass feature for yourself as well. That is going to add variety to the sound as well. So you're sort of changing the texture of the instrumentation itself is going to provide variety too. So we've talked about the music itself. Now think about some of the practical things that have to do with being a leader. One thing I like to do when I am particularly nervous about something is to start a text thread with everybody on the gig. Obviously that's a simple thing and a common, but if you initiate it ahead of time, that can help people in the moment. If something is happening that is a crisis, you should get there early to know where you're going and so on and so forth, and make sure any kinks are worked out. You can communicate that to the band as they are on their way. What you want to do as well is make sure that, again, you are trying to facilitate the most efficient and professional thing. So as best as you can, without spending a ton of money, or like, you know, if you're in New York City, like I was for so long, you can't really bring much stuff with you at all. So you really rely on other folks to bring stuff. But now with having a car myself, I can bring more things in the car, like extra music stands, or maybe a mic cable, or a power cable, or an extension cord, are all great things to have. You can even bring an extra tie if a tie is required for the gig, especially if it's a tux gig and a bow tie is required. Bring an extra bow tie. I promise you at some point someone is going to forget one, and you'll be thankful that you have one with you. So having those extra things is great. You also want to communicate to the band, as I said before, that it is, if it's outside, not only for yourself, but for them, bring clips to clip music to the music stand if people need to read. It's often forgotten and will be so appreciated and will really prevent a lot of disasters, potential disasters on the gig. You can also ask folks to print out any music that you might be reading, but I don't always rely on everybody. It depends on who the person is. It's really smart that if you've got music that everyone needs to read, that you bring the music. Even if they're gonna bring it, you bring it just in case. And I also recommend getting some simple dark color, like dark blue folders to bring your music in. You might label it or not, but try to look professional so that when somebody's opening it up on the music stand, if they have a wire stand or whatnot, the back of the music looks a little bit better than just loose leaf paper sort of sitting on a music stand. Again, be thinking under the heading of what can I control and how can I facilitate everyone having a really good experience, and for the client, whether that's the venue or the bride or whomever, that they feel like we are prepared and we are executing a good performance for them. Lastly, depending on the players and the situation of the gig, you might want to confirm with folks again after that initial email, like 4 days ahead of time. You might want to confirm with them the day before the gig or the morning of the gig. Sometimes if something is particularly high stress or particularly high risk in a way, I really want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. I've had players not show up or be late and had clients very, very upset, and I've had to give them money back. It is really a drag and something, believe me, you want to avoid. So all these things are, again, setting yourself up and setting the band up for success. Now on the gig itself, as I say, hopefully you are the leader, and again, talking back to what is important to us, the music itself, be thinking about that programming. As I mentioned, you want to be thinking during a tune, what tune is next? But thinking in these big headings like a tune in 3, or for example, I didn't mention before, a tune by a particular composer, like you say, oh, we haven't played a monk tune, or a Thelonious Monk tune. Those have a very sort of specific flavor to them, which I feel like adds variety to the programming. So you're thinking to yourself, oh, I haven't played a monk tune. Oh, but this player is kind of just starting out. I don't really know if they know a bunch of monk tunes. So, you know, let me see if they know X, Y, Z. You know, do you know I Mean You? And if they say no, if in your head you're thinking monk tune, you're just sort of going down, suggest other monk tunes, right? That fulfills that for you. Or if you're thinking a tune in 3, you suggest Up Jump Spring, they don't know it. Okay, let's do All the Things You Are in 3, whatever it is. So you're thinking in these big headings also facilitates the discussion about what tune can come next. So you're thinking about all those things while you're playing. If it's an event, there's a couple other little things you gotta sort of think about, right? Which is to pay very, very close attention to whoever is in charge. Like, who's your boss in the room at that moment? It could be an event planner, it could be a wedding planner, it could be just the person that's throwing the party, whatever it is. That contact, you want to meet them when you get to the venue, and you want to keep an eye on them because they very likely will have something else happening in the event itself, like a speech, and they're going to tell you when to stop. So you need to be prepared to stop on a dime. Stop in the middle of a tune. It does not matter if you're in the middle of the bridge, just stop. It doesn't matter. If you can get out of it in a musical way, that's great. But more often than not, they're not approaching you at the end of a tune. So just be ready to stop in a gentle way right away as soon as they say stop. You gotta just keep your eyes open on the room, paying attention to other folks, which unfortunately takes away from what we're doing playing bass, but you are responsible for the whole thing, right? So you've got to sort of separate that part from yourself. I mentioned getting to the gig and meeting the venue contact. It's also really, really helpful to get there earlier than anybody else, so you can figure out any kind of kinks. If things get particularly weird, you might want to open up a map on your phone, and you know how you can drop a pin into your exact location and then share that exact location if something is weird with an address. That's very helpful. You can share it to that group text thread that I mentioned before, and so on and so forth. So you're getting early to find all those things, any kind of hospitality things. Is there a room you can hang out? Where is food if they're giving you food? And importantly, where do you put your cases? If you're in some kind of convention center, there's not often an obvious place to put your case, so you need to ask somebody. Oftentimes that can be your point of contact at the venue, but you can also ask somebody else that's working there, hey, here's a good place to store a few cases. Almost always, if you're nice, people will be nice back to you as far as helping you facilitate what you need to do as a leader. Whether it's a concert or a background gig, and there are breaks involved, be sure to keep your breaks to what you agreed upon. If it's 10 minutes, keep it a strict 10 minutes. Do not let yourself or others get lazy with that. An extended downtime, whether it's between tunes or on a break with no music happening when you are hired as a musician, is a really bad look. Please don't do that to make all of us look good, right? So keep your breaks to what they are. Start when they say you're gonna start, when you say you're gonna start, and stop when you say you're gonna stop. That's not so much for the client, but for the other musicians. They wanna go home. So if you're supposed to stop at 9, get as close to 9 as you can. Sometimes it's a fun game to try to stop the tune exactly on the second that it turns to the time you're supposed to stop. At a concert, it can be a little bit different. The venue might wanna wait a little bit, hold your start time till more people get into the room. That's totally understandable. Just don't force anybody who's giving you money to wait for you any more than you've agreed upon, is the general heading of what I'm trying to say. Much of this stuff, as an aside, really has to do with perception as opposed to the reality of the music itself, unfortunately. If people perceive that you are put together, if you are respectful and on time and communicative and treat people with seriousness and take their requests seriously and try to fulfill their requests and show up on time and play the music decently and don't take too long breaks and start when you're supposed to. These simple outside things give people the feeling that you played well, whether or not you did. So you are really setting yourself up for success if the external situation feels like it's smooth. So after the gig, obviously be sure to say thanks to everybody before you leave, maybe offer help, get some gear to a car or whatnot. An important thing though is people want to get home and they want to get paid. So get them paid as soon as you can. Sometimes I'll do it on the gig itself. Usually I'll do it that night if I can, at the latest, digitally, Venmo and so on. If they want checks, I'll bring the check with me and give it to them at the gig. If there's going to be a delay in payment for any reason whatsoever, even if it's a couple days, be sure to communicate with the other musicians that you need more time for XYZ. I need the check to clear. they have not paid me yet, they promised XYZ. If you don't get paid in a certain amount of time, that's a different conversation, right? But the main thing is communicate with your band members so that they know what's going on. Don't just leave them hanging, where is the money from the gig on Sunday? And speaking of money, if the client hasn't paid you, be sure to note to yourself that you haven't been paid for this gig. I keep that in another organizational app that I haven't been paid for XYZ. And I also keep it in OmniOutliner, as you saw, but I want to make an extra note to myself that if someone, especially if they were supposed to pay me and didn't, that's a big deal. And I'm going to follow up with them every couple days until I get paid. Thankfully, you've got a contract, right? And I have learned the hard way, please, even if it's somebody that you feel like you can trust, try to get a contract signed. Really, 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 even before you call people, try to get the contract signed if you can, because I promise you, it is a very bad feeling to have to pay people out of your own pocket because you didn't get paid. I hope that all this talking was helpful for you and that maybe it gave you some different ideas, some different aspects about how to lead your own gig. And I wish you many, many, many of your own gigs. I'm sorry we won't be on them together unless you want to do Ornette Coleman double quartet kind of vibe. Nonetheless, thanks for joining me today, and be sure to look for PDF below with a list of these things that we talked about. Always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.